the epistle of James chapter 4. This morning I want to draw your attention to verses 13 through 17. And we'll discover the truth about tomorrow. The truth about tomorrow. I don't know if you ever wanted to know what the future holds. The only one who knows the future is God. With that being said, James wants you and I never to forget that no one of us, not one of us, should ever boast about tomorrow. For as Solomon said in his sacred record in chapter 27, verse 1, boast not of tomorrow, for we know not what a day will bring. Now, we don't know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. So this is where our hope and trust is to be placed. But in James chapter 4 this morning, we're going to get a warning from James about this foolish boasting about what we plan to do with our lives. And James is going to say once again to those that are mature and want to know the truth, that you and I must approach the future with humility. And I'm going to try to get started before y'all fall asleep now. So I see some people nodding off on me. But listen, you want to fight that right now. Let me read the text. I don't know. The enemy might have some sleeping pills. I don't know. Y'all were wide awake for the singing. Let me read the context beginning at verse 13 as we finish up chapter 4. This has been a tremendous study, and if you really want to be mature, James has some more to tell us. This is the last message for chapter 4, and then there are 4 messages for chapter 5, and that's it. But guaranteed success if you apply what here has been stated for your benefit and for your blessing. And don't get it all confused. James has never stated that any soul could be saved by good works. He's just saying the one who is saved ought to show some good work and ought to be about some good work. Say amen. So don't get it mixed up, because some people want to work their way to heaven. But only you won't arrive at heaven. For no man comes to the Father but by Jesus. Let me read. Listen as I read these moving and important verses. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit, whereas you do not know what will happen tomorrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But now you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to him who knows to do good and does it not, to him it is sin. To him it is sin. Look at that verse 15 again, as I will hasten to bring you this message. Verse 15, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live to do this or to do that. Sounds very familiar to the prayer Jesus prayed in the garden, not my will, but thy will be done. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? This morning I want to talk to you from this subject, make plans to do the Lord's will. You want to make some plans? Make plans to do the Lord's will. And those are the plans that will succeed and will always come to pass. Amen. Let me illustrate what I mean to say this morning, if you would permit me. After years of political dispute and unrest, the French people welcomed a guy by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte. Some of you history lovers, listen, there's a history you ought to investigate. They welcomed Napoleon. He became their new leader. And by 1812, he had created an empire. It almost covered all of Europe. But it is said that when Napoleon Bonaparte, when he set his mind to invade Russia, that somebody tried unsuccessfully to convince him not to attempt a Russian invasion. You know, when you're acting on your own, sometimes you think you are more than you really are. How many of y'all still listening? I think I shared some of that with this church family on how I used to be able to do some things fairly well. Now I'm just happy to be able to do some things. Somebody tried to warn Napoleon, don't take on Russia right now. You're not ready. You're not able. But it was unsuccessful. The record books record a letter he received. The note had a verse in it from Proverbs 16, verse 9. Proverbs 16, verse 9 reads, man proposes, but God disposes. And it made Napoleon indignant. I don't know if some of you history buffs like to listen to NPR or the radio stations, but on occasion they'll play some of the tapes of the past presidents and their private conversations. But of course, they're dead and gone now. So even if you get angry with what you hear, you're not going to be able to affect the person that was talking. And I've listened to quite a few, and listen, some of those presidents, they could cuss and swear. When Napoleon got this letter that said, listen, man proposes, but God disposes, he was indignant. And he wrote back and said, I not only dispose, but I propose. So I call the shots. It's what I say. I say Russia will be part of the empire of Europe. This is what he said. And how many of you know we don't often bring to pass what we say? Are y'all still listening? Because history proves that he did attempt to invade Russia. Oh, yes, he did. He made the attempt, but it was a miserable failure. And not only was he defeated by Russia in 1814, after he had been doing so well, they forced him into exile. So not only was his army crushed, but not only was it crushed, he had to flee for his life. And he tried to rally back and get some more troops, and some of you know that didn't work either. And 1815, he was done, gone. Why do I say that this morning? Because you and I should be making plans to do the Lord's will. All other plans are subject to be scrapped. James is here giving you and me a warning. He's warning against arrogance and self-confidence. There is an arrogance that plans to do things apart from God, about a future that only God controls and that only God has. And as I stated, only God knows the future. But I should have said also that the future belongs to God. And let me say, nothing about tomorrow is known by you and me, apart from what's in this book that God has said. You and I don't know nothing about tomorrow. We don't know if a storm is coming or a hurricane. Listen, you and I don't even know what's going to happen tonight. And I didn't like it, but one of those funeral homes used to have a saying, and I didn't like it. I was offended by it. And they call themselves making you think about the hereafter. They used to have a saying, you might tie your shoes up in the morning. I didn't like it, but somebody else might untie them tonight. I thought that ain't no way to advertise for no funeral home, because I don't want y'all untying my shoes. I didn't like it. Because one thing to curse the darkness, but tell me something about the light. Don't tell me I'm just going to die. Tell me how I can live. Don't tell me I got a problem. Tell me what the solution is. And this is what's so wonderful about the record that's in this book, because God just doesn't show us what's wrong. God has a remedy. God doesn't just say your condition is terrible. God says, I've got a cure for your condition and for mine. Say amen, church. And this is what we love about God. Oh, he curses the darkness, but he lights a candle. He is the light. Oh, I wish I had a witness in here. I wish somebody would pray that God would speak through me. Then you might hear something. Because you need a word from the Lord. Oh, you need more than a song. You need a word from God. And if I hear from God, I can make it all the way. I can run through and I can tackle what is facing me. If I get a word from the Lord, I can keep my head above drowning waters. I can pay $4 for gas. If the Lord is with me, who could be against me? And that's what we have in this record. We've got a word from the Lord. And I want you to know that though we don't know what the future holds, God holds the future. But you and I must be humble in all of our efforts. And some people just believe that since they lived yesterday, that today is guaranteed. Listen, that's not possible. That's not reality, church. And then some of us young, some of y'all still young, I see you. And I'm not upset. I'm happy for you. I was once young. Amen. I was young one time and you were one. But remember, you ain't going to stay young. And never forget that God sometimes calls the young person. Oh, yes, he does. You go down to the funeral home. It ain't all old folk in there. Oh, no, it's not. And sometimes you ought to go past that. You don't need to know who it is. It'll sober you up. It'll make you appreciate life in this world. God hath given us life. And we ought to use it for his glory. And this week, the hundreds of tornadoes that touched down is proof you don't know what a day will bring. And neither do I. And many that went to sleep that night never imagined that God would be calling them in the morning. And one lady said that as the house fell on her, she started to say, Lord, let me be with you if this is my last day. And God spared her. Because she's got a life to live for him.